I'd like to welcome you to the first of our informal talks. And I'm Andrew Lee from Humanities and Social Science Reference. And I'm happy to introduce Panos Siperodis, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Information, Operations, and Management Sciences at the Leonard N. Stern School of Business of NYU. His area of expertise is databases and information retrieval with an emphasis on management of textual data, data mining. His research interests include web searching, economic-aware text and web mining, data cleaning, and data integration. He received his PhD in computer science from Columbia University in 2004 and a Bachelor's of Science degree from the Computer Engineering and Informatics Department of the University of Patras, Greece in 1999. He's received 2 Microsoft Live Labs Awards, 2 Best Paper Awards from groups with acronyms IEE, and I know what IEE is, but I don't know what ICDE is in 2005, and the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, is that right? SIGMOD 2006, sorry for those of you who know what those mean. And lots of other awards. He's very professionally active. If you look at his resume, a lot of the stuff he's currently very, very busy. He's also the recipient of a career award from the National Science Foundation. He's made a number of web pages on other topics. This is my comments beyond his resume, including an extensive profile in Greek and English of his hometown Saras in Macedonia in Greece. And so I have to tell you, I mean, when he spoke at a conference we went to at New York Public Library, it was fabulous. He's very exciting and a very dynamic speaker, and I think you'll really enjoy it.
Okay, talking about expectations now. Okay, thank you. So thank you for having me here, Andrew. So what I'm going to talk about is some very brief overview of some of the research that we have been doing at Stern, and I'm going to show you some, I think, interesting results. And as I proceed, I will give you some problems that we had and the need that we start to have about libraries to provide with some standardized data sets that are going to facilitate a large number of researchers to conduct research today. But we'll get to that. So in order to start, let me give you one motivating example. So suppose that you are trying to buy a digital camera. So let's say this Canon EOS 350 and so on. So you go online, you go to a comparison shopping website, and there you have a list of merchants that sell exactly the same product, but you'll see that they sell it for different price. So for example, in this case we have PC Nation selling this camera for $773, and we have buydig.com which sells it for $784. So taking a look at these prices, someone might say, okay, so where from would you buy the camera?
PC Nation.
Well, that's a rational answer, right? So you look at it, it's okay, why spending more? And we have been monitoring these marketplaces to see who sells what and for what price. And for example, in this case, we see that it is not PC Nation that makes the sale, but indeed it is buydig.com. So someone looks at that and says, well, why? And we observe that in this case we have buydig.com commanding a so-called price premium compared to PC Nation. So essentially they sell exactly the same product in exactly the same marketplace, but we see that buydig.com can charge higher prices than the competition and still make the sale. And someone might say, well, this might be an isolated example, but after monitoring the marketplace for quite a while, we observed the following distribution of price premiums. So let me explain this chart. So in this axis, we have the price premiums that happen in each transaction. So anything positive means that the seller can charge higher price than the competition and still make the sale. So we observed, let's say, approximately 3,000 transactions where the merchant that made the sale charge $25 more. And we have even cases, you know, some like 1,000 cases where they charge $50 more or $100 more, and still they sell the product. So someone might look at that and say, well, okay, I understand the negative ones, but are people irrational? Why are they paying more for a product that they can get for less? Now, interestingly enough, even the negative one is still irrational, because it means that you have people that are charging significantly less than the competitors in order to make a sale. So if you are a seller, why would you charge $100 less than the competitors in order to make the sale? Still you can have lower price, but you don't need to be $100 less than the competition. So which means that if we observe negative price premiums, then the sellers are irrational. So we look at that and we say, well, why this thing happened? So, well, the short answer is that people, when they buy online, they buy more than a product. You don't just buy the camera, you buy also an experience. You want to, when you buy the camera, you want the camera to arrive. So you are buying and paying also for the reputation of the seller that you are buying from. So essentially, you are also paying in order to get the product delivered fast and not a month later. You are paying, you know, to have good packaging and not some sloppy packaging and so on. You pay for responsiveness and so on. You had a question? Oh, no, okay. So,
I have a comment.
Yes.
Because this completely blew my mind, and now this is, sort of plays out on this. I was on eBay and I wanted to get a Roomba. Mm-hmm. And there was a buy it now Roomba for like whatever the price was. And right next to it, in an auction ending like in 5 minutes, people were furiously bidding way over the buy it now price for exactly the same thing. So I've got the buy it now price, but I was hesitant because I was thinking, what do they know that I don't know? But I got
Did you check who was
new Roomba, and it was fine. And
well, did you check who was selling the buy it now? If the person that had the buy it now had a very limited history.
No, it was a good history, I think. I don't know.
For you. Other people might felt that the other.
I think if they're 94 or above, I like them.
So essentially now we have a fact where reputation actually has some monetary value in the marketplace. So what's reputation? I mean, if you want to go online in the Amazon marketplace, each seller has a profile that looks like that. That has, for example, feedback rating, 4.8 stars over the last 12 months, 159 ratings, how many positive experiences in the last 30 days, how many negative ones, same thing for last 90 days, last year, and so on. So this is the numeric part of the reputation. Plus, we have text, where people describe their experience. So let me read. For example, here it says good. Here, very fast shipping, perfect packaging, no complaints.
No, I actually didn't look. I didn't.
Well, as you will see, people actually look at that. So, order arrived much sooner than expected. Software works fine. Definitely very good. Or, I have been waiting 3 weeks for an in-stock item. This is the worst internet experience I have ever had. You know, I will never order from this company again. And of course, this is not only the text feedback. It goes on, and there are pages and pages typically of such feedback. So, for example, speedy shipping, or, you know, I was expecting it 2 days, but it took 3. Other than that, no problems. Great seller, quick as lightning responses, or I have been waiting 3 weeks for an in-stock item. Okay, so, or blah, blah, and so on. So we have a lot of text that describes the past experiences that other people had for this seller. So, now what we are going to describe in a single setting, we are going to see how the text that people leave describing their experiences affects their pricing power. And since the reputation is being captured in this text, we are going to see how text affects price premiums, and we are going to see some interesting results. So, people have been looking at reputation in the past, and however, when they were examining reputation, they were getting a recommendation letter. Yeah, he's good. he works hard. So it's
You see people that put A plus and they'll put 8 pluses.
blah, blah, plus, plus, plus. So yes, this is essentially the norm and the expectations in this marketplace is that people exaggerate. So a simple good packaging actually has this, well, just good packaging. I mean, it's not enough. So you can see that using this economic metric to measure the effect of text and so on has the ability to capture the pragmatic meaning and how people interpret this particular text. And we have actually been working on this idea where we say, well, we have an economic variable in one sense, in one side, and we have text on the other. So for example, in this case, we have price premium and reputation feedback. We can do the same thing with product sales and reviews, let's say on Amazon. And we see things like excellent lens for a digital camera increase sales by 3%, poor lens decrease by 1%. Same thing for photos, and we can see that excellent is actually positive, poor is negative, and we can see that lens is actually 3 times more important than, that photos is actually 2 times more important than poor. So, yeah.
Is this for exactly the same product? I mean, in theory, are people skewed by the fact that they had a good purchase experience to say it's an excellent photo? I mean, it could be.
These are the reviews for digital cameras. So we are this is a different domain. So we're examining now.
I'm talking about the same camera.
Sorry?
The same exact model.
No, in general. This is now we shift from instead of talking about what people buy online from which merchants, we see how different products sell on Amazon and the effect of product reviews that people leave about these products. And we see, for example, different effects. Yes? You had a question?
Well, I know that you said that they're using natural language.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether or not, are people using the word excellent instead of the word superior or
No.
tremendous? Or because in your examples, I see a repetition of excellent. And I'm wondering, are there studies made as to when people want to use a superlative as to whether they're going to use one word as opposed to another?
We examine the meaning of the different words, what it means. So, for example, we see, for example, you can see that we have, let's see, packaging, do I have it?
How many people use wonderful, for example, instead of excellent? Or is that meaningless to you? Are you making
It is completely meaningless to me. So I'm just saying, wonderful, how does it affect the power?
But when you're doing your searching and you're looking for the word excellent.
I'm looking for any adjective that modifies a word that I identified as dimension. So, for example, for packaging, I will find awesome packaging, excellent packaging, wonderful packaging, horrible packaging. And if it is an adjective, I will try to estimate what is its effect.
And you couple some of the adjectives, like you put, is wonderful and excellent to the same cohort?
No, each one individually.
Okay.
So I'm trying to be as agnostic to the semantics as possible, because otherwise I would have grouped good potentially with the positive ones, and I would never figure out that good is actually interpreted separate.
I'm gonna start looking for lightning now.
So same thing, for example, we can, we did the analysis for product reviews, and using the same idea, we try to see what is the weight that people put in different dimensions of products. Not of sellers, but of products. So, for example, when people buy digital cameras, we see that, well, they care about the quality of the camera, but you can see that when they buy an SLR camera versus a point and shoot, they care much more about the quality. For resolution, interestingly enough, people that buy SLRs, they know that resolution of the camera doesn't matter that much as it matters, for the lenses, for example. And you can see that they put less importance in the feature resolution than people that buy simple point and shoot that actually pay a lot of attention to resolution. For lenses, you can see that people that buy ASLRs, they care more about lenses compared to people that buy SLRs, and so on. And this is actually based on their actual purchasing behavior. We have seen, for example, that people talk a lot about zoom for digital cameras, but they'd never buy based on zoom. Zoom doesn't have influence on the purchasing behavior. Things like resolution and lenses and quality, they do. Now, this is the basic idea of having some economic behavior and text, and we have been applying the same basic concept in many different applications. So we have, for example, some economic type of data that are being influenced by news. And one particular example that we examined was how political news affect prediction markets. So what do we mean by prediction markets? Well, it is essentially a betting market where people were betting whether some event will happen or not. So for example, here is how the prediction market for last year's presidential election looked like. So for example, people were betting early in 2007, you know, that there was 1 out of 10 probability that Obama is going to be elected president. As we reached the primaries, you know, it started coming closer to 50%, 60%, and as we're getting close to the election, the probability that Obama was going to be elected was increasing. Actually, it almost reached 100%. Same thing we had for McCain. People didn't believe that there was a lot of probability of him being